What if I told you that some of the fastest cars of the 1950s didn't wear racing stripes, didn't have intimidating names, and didn't even look sporty? What if I told you that while the world wasn't even talking about muscle cars yet, there were already big, quiet, seemingly harmless sedans capable of humiliating far more aggressive-looking cars without making a scene? In the 1950s, a lot of people made the same mistake. They underestimated cars that looked boring, family cars, responsible dad cars, and they paid for it. In this video, we're talking about forgotten sleepers of the 1950s, cars that didn't look fast, that didn't want attention, but when the moment came, left their rivals behind without warning. 1951 to 1954, Hudson Hornet. At first glance, the Hornet looked like the opposite of a fast car. It was tall, wide, heavy, and visually conservative. A large family sedan with unathletic proportions and an image that inspired respect, but not fear. To many people, it was simply a dad car. And that was the mistake. Under that non-threatening body, Hudson hid one of the smartest and most dangerous setups of the entire decade. The famous 308 cubic inch inline-six twin H-power engine with dual carburetors produced around 170 horsepower. That number may not sound impressive today, but in the early 1950s it was far more than the car appeared to have. What really mattered wasn't just the power, but how it was used. Thanks to its step-down design, the Hornet had a lower center of gravity than many rivals, better weight distribution, and surprisingly strong cornering ability. While other cars struggled to stay planted, the Hudson simply stuck to the road. In acceleration, it could run 0 to 60 miles per hour in roughly 9 seconds, outstanding numbers for a large sedan of its time. And at the top end, it could push past 105 miles per hour, leaving more than a few sporty-looking V8s staring at its taillights. But the Hornet's real terror wasn't on the street, it was on the track. Between 1951 and 1954, the Hudson Hornet dominated NASCAR, winning over 80% of the races it entered. A family sedan, powered by a straight six, systematically beating louder, more powerful, supposedly faster cars. It was a constant public humiliation that rivals couldn't easily explain away. That's what makes the Hornet a perfect sleeper. It didn't intimidate, it didn't warn you, it didn't look fast, until it was already too late. Today, the Hudson Hornet is remembered as a racing legend, but back then plenty of people underestimated it and paid the price. Because before muscle cars even existed as a concept, this seemingly harmless sedan was already terrifying everyone. 1957, Ford Fairlane 500. The Fairlane is the kind of car almost nobody would look at twice. A family sedan, clean lines, balanced design, and perfectly blended into everyday 1950s America. It didn't look sporty, it didn't try to intimidate. To most people, it was just another Ford. And that's exactly why it worked so well as a sleeper. Because beneath that completely ordinary appearance, the Fairlane 500 could hide some very serious V8 engines, like the 312Y block, capable of producing over 270 horsepower in its hottest configurations. For a 1957 family sedan, that was power nobody expected to find. In acceleration, a well-optioned Fairlane could run 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 8 seconds, putting it on par with cars that looked far more aggressive. At the top end, it could exceed 110 miles per hour, unthinkable for a car that looked like it was built to take the kids to the grocery store. What made the Fairlane unsettling wasn't just how fast it was, but how effortlessly it did it. There was no drama, no excessive noise, no sense of struggle. It accelerated naturally, as if nothing unusual was happening, and that made it a classic stoplight mistake. Many rivals assumed it was slow, and found out too late that it wasn't. That contrast between everyday looks and real performance is exactly what defines a true sleeper. The Fairlane didn't need to hide. Nobody took it seriously from the start. Today, the 1957 Ford Fairlane 500 remains relatively affordable compared to other fast classics of the era. On today's market, a well-preserved example typically sells between $35,000 and $60,000, depending on condition and engine. It's not rare, it's not exotic, it's not famous for being fast. And yet, in the 1950s, it was one of the most common and expensive mistakes someone could make on the street. And what comes next follows that exact same logic, but with a touch of elegance that made it even easier to underestimate. 1954 to 1956, Cadillac Series 62. The Series of 62 represented everything a fast car was not supposed to be in the 1950s. Huge, smooth, luxurious, and built to float down the road, not to fight at a stoplight. It was the kind of car people associated with absolute comfort, not acceleration. And yet, it hit a very serious surprise. Under that endless hood, Cadillac installed large displacement V8s like the 331 and later the 365 cubic inch engines, producing over 250 horsepower. For a car weighing close to 2 tons, that was far more than its image suggested. In real terms, the Series 62 could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 8.5 seconds and reach top speeds close to 115 miles per hour. Not pure sports car numbers, but absolutely shocking for a car that looked designed purely for comfort. And it did it effortlessly, without loud noise or any sense of urgency. That was its true power as a sleeper. It didn't intimidate. It didn't warn you. It simply moved forward with a calm authority that left more than a few drivers wondering what had just happened. Many people made the same mistake, assuming a Cadillac that large couldn't be fast. And they found out too late, when that massive sedan was already pulling away with unsettling ease. Today, the mid-1950s Cadillac Series 62 remains highly valued for its design and presence. On the current market, a well-kept example usually ranges between $50,000 and $90,000, prices that reflect its status, but not always the hidden performance it was capable of. And now, I want to hear your opinion. Do you think a sleeper should be completely discreet? Or is it even more impressive when the car is big, luxurious, and looks totally incapable of being fast? Leave your answer in the comments. 1958, Pontiac Star Chief. This is the kind of car that represented exactly what many buyers wanted in the late 1950s. Respectability, comfort, and a flawless family image. Long lines, balanced design, and a presence that inspired confidence, not aggression. Nobody looked at it expecting speed, and that was the problem. Pontiac was already beginning to experiment with a more performance-oriented identity, but the Star Chief did it quietly. Under that elegant body, it could be equipped with large V8s like the 370 cubic inch engine, producing close to 300 horsepower. For a sedan that looked this calm in 1958, that was a dangerously underestimated combination. In real-world driving, it could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in just over 8 seconds and reach top speeds near 115 miles per hour. Those weren't pure sports car numbers, but they were more than enough to outrun many cars with far more aggressive styling, especially in short bursts where torque made all the difference. What made it truly deceptive was how it behaved. It didn't feel nervous or explosive. It felt stable, solid, and predictable. And that led many drivers to make the same mistake, assuming it was slow simply because it didn't look like it was in a hurry. That contrast between respectable appearance and real performance is what makes it a classic 1950s sleeper. It didn't need to hide anything. Nobody suspected it. Today, the 1958 Pontiac Star Chief remains one of the most undervalued sleepers of the decade. On the current market, a well-kept example usually falls between $30,000 and $55,000, relatively modest numbers for a car with this much hidden character. And what comes next takes this idea even further, because the next car didn't just look calm, it looked downright slow. 1953 to 1956, Buick Roadmaster. The Roadmaster was everything a fast car wasn't supposed to be. Big, wide, comfortable, quiet, and deeply luxurious. It was the kind of automobile associated with relaxed trips, pressed suits, and effortless cruising. Absolutely nobody looked at it thinking about acceleration or speed, and yet, that's exactly where Buick made one of those wonderful mistakes of the 1950s. Under that massive hood lived the famous Nailhead V8, an engine that wasn't about high revs, but about something far more important on the street: massive low-end torque. In its strongest versions, the Roadmaster produced over 230 horsepower. Very serious numbers for a luxury car of the mid-1950s. In practice, That translated into surprisingly quick acceleration for such a large vehicle. A Roadmaster could run 0 to 60 miles per hour in roughly 8.5 seconds and reach top speeds near 110 miles per hour, all without excessive noise, drama, or any sense of effort. The car simply moved, with authority. That was its real danger as a sleeper. It didn't look fast, it didn't feel fast, but it was. While other cars warned you with vibration, sound, and tension, the Roadmaster delivered speed wrapped in silence and comfort. It was the kind of car that could pull away from lighter rivals without the driver even realizing it, until glancing at the speedometer. Today, the 1950s Buick Roadmaster remains one of the most interesting luxury sleepers of the era. On today's market, a well-preserved example typically sells between $40,000 and $70,000, a price that reflects its elegance more than the hidden performance it truly offered. 1957 Mercury Montclair. This is one of those cars that goes unnoticed even today. It doesn't have the fame of a Ford, nor the historical weight of a Cadillac. Its design is clean, balanced, and polite. Too proper to look fast, too elegant to raise suspicion. And here's a key detail that directly connects it to the previous car. The Montclair used the same 312 cubic inch Y-block V8 found in the Fairlane 500 we just talked about. But the context was completely different. While that engine was hidden inside an everyday Ford sedan, in the Mercury, it was wrapped in a longer, more refined body that looked even less threatening. Same heart, but inside a body that seemed calmer, quieter, and more relaxed. With power outputs approaching 290 horsepower, the Montclair delivered performance nearly identical to the Fairlane, but with an even smoother and quieter character. It didn't feel fast, it felt solid, and that made many drivers lower their guard. On the street, the result was the same mistake repeated again and again. A car that looked built for relaxed cruising, but could run 0 to 60 miles per hour in around 8 seconds, and push past 110 miles per hour with no apparent effort. Today, the 1957 Mercury Montclair remains one of the most accessible and forgotten sleepers of the 1950s. On today's market, a well-preserved example typically sells between $30,000 and $55,000, depending on condition and configuration. And now I want to hear your opinion, because the dilemma here is clear. Do you prefer this kind of elegant, quiet sleeper, or do you lean toward a sleeper that looks clumsy and non-threatening from the outside? Let me know in the comments. 1955. Packard Caribbean. When people saw a Caribbean, the last thing they thought about was performance. Packard stood for tradition, elegance, and institutional respect. Cars for executives, diplomats, and people who valued silence above everything else. Nothing about its image suggested speed, and yet, the Caribbean hid a side that almost no one talked about. Under that refined body, Packard installed large displacement V8s, such as the 352 cubic inch engine, producing around 275 horsepower. Very high figures for a luxury-focused car in the mid-1950s. It wasn't an engine built to show off. It was built to push with authority and smooth, constant force. In real-world terms, the Caribbean could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in roughly 8.5 seconds and reach top speeds close to 115 miles per hour. It didn't look fast, it didn't feel aggressive, but when asked, it responded with an ease that was deeply unsettling for a car of its size and character. That contrast is what makes it such a peculiar sleeper. It wasn't underestimated for looking cheap or clumsy. It was underestimated for looking too serious. While other manufacturers scream power through exaggerated styling, Packard offered performance hidden beneath an almost untouchable appearance. And that made many rivals lower their guard from the very first second. Today, the Packard Caribbean is one of the most overlooked sleepers of the 1950s. On today's market, a well-preserved example typically falls between $60,000 and $100,000, values that reflect its exclusivity and design, but not always the hidden performance it delivered in its day. And what comes next marks an important shift. Because the next car isn't just an elegant sleeper, it's one of the first clear steps toward the modern muscle car. 1959. Oldsmobile Super 88. This is a very special case on this list. Unlike many other sleepers, it didn't look awkward, old, or outdated, but it also didn't look like a truly fast car. It was comfortable, modern for its time, and clearly aimed at family use and long-distance travel. And yet, it was dangerously close to what we would later call a muscle car. Under the hood, the Super 88 carried the famous Rocket 394 V8, an enormous engine for the late 1950s, capable of producing around 315 horsepower. In 1959, that was an extremely high number, especially for a sedan with no aggressive sports branding. That engine, combined with a relatively well-balanced chassis for its size, allowed the Super 88 to run from 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 7.5 seconds and reach top speeds near 118 miles per hour. Numbers that put it ahead of many so-called sports cars of the era, especially those that relied more on image than on real performance. What made the Super 88 especially deceptive was how effortlessly it delivered that power. It didn't feel dramatic. It didn't feel stressed. It simply moved forward with steady, overwhelming force. It didn't intimidate visually, but when it accelerated, it made it very clear it was playing in a higher league than its appearance suggested. That's why many enthusiasts consider it one of the first muscle cars before the muscle car era truly began, and at the same time, one of the most effective sleepers of the late 1950s. It didn't shout power, it simply had it. Today, the 1959 Oldsmobile Super 88 is still highly respected among enthusiasts who know its story. On the current market, a well-kept example usually sells between $45,000 and $80,000, depending on condition and originality. 1955, Chrysler 300. This car looked like anything but a dangerous machine. Serious design, formal lines, elegant proportions, and an image clearly associated with executives, long trips, and status. No exaggerated fins, no youthful styling. Visually, it was a respectable car, too respectable to look fast. And yet, it was one of the fastest cars of its time. Beneath that sober exterior, Chrysler hid something completely out of place for a mid-1950s luxury sedan. A 331 cubic inch Hemi V8, producing a real 300 horsepower. In 1955, that number wasn't just a high, it was shocking. In fact, it became the first American production car officially rated at 300 horsepower. The result was behavior no one expected. The Chrysler 300 could accelerate from 0 to 60 miles per hour in roughly 7.5 seconds and reach top speeds close to 130 miles per hour, figures associated with sports cars, not with a large formal sedan. On the open road, it simply disappeared. What made it truly unsettling was how it did it. No excessive noise. No dramatic vibration, no sense of effort. While other cars seemed to fight for every mile per hour, the 300 surged forward with intimidating calm, as if it always had the power in reserve. It was the kind of car that humiliated others without trying, because no one saw it coming. That contrast is what makes it the ultimate sleeper of the 1950s. It didn't look slow because it was clumsy. It looked slow because it was polite. And that made it even more dangerous. Today, the 1955 Chrysler 300 is one of the most respected cars of the decade. On the current market, a well-preserved example typically ranges between $80,000 and $150,000, reflecting not only its design, but the historical impact it had. These cars never tried to look fast. They didn't have intimidating names, they didn't wear racing stripes, they didn't scream power. And that's exactly why they work so well. Now I want to know what you think. Which of these 1950s sleepers do you find the most deceptive of all? The family sedan, the silent luxury car, or the executive machine that never seemed to be in a hurry? Leave your answer in the comments. And if you enjoy discovering this hidden side of the American automobile, I recommend watching the video that appears on screen. There, we talk about the 10 fastest luxury coupes of the 1960s that few people remember. Elegant machines that looked calm, but hid performance capable of shocking anyone. Click and keep traveling with us through the stories almost no one tells about classic cars. See you in the next ride.